Hello folks, this is Aaron and Zach with ProCircular. We are in the process of getting this set up. We're going to give some other people a chance to log in here, so sit tight.
All right, everybody. Thanks for coming out to the ProCircular cybersecurity flash briefing on Intel's Meltdown and Spectre. We'll go ahead and get rolling here. Maybe. Okay. Presentation disclaimer. This is, just your basic. We're not here to provide you with anything but information. Take it away as you will, and do with it what you will. Always consult with your attorneys for specific advice related to you and your businesses. That is your role, not ours. Who am I? Here's my compulsory self-celebration slide here. My name is Zach Zaffis. I'm a security engineer here with ProCircular, cybersecurity expert. ProCircular is an information security privacy firm located here in Iowa. I'm also co-creator and current sitting president of SecIC, which is an educational not-for-profit based on information and network security, essentially, and building the community here in Iowa. I've spent coming up on 2 decades, which is amazing to say, in IT, about 12 years on the blue team side, 5 currently in the red zone. I have a bunch of alphabet soup credentials, most recently CH, black badge holder from a number of CTFs. What else? Currently an InfraGard member, partnership between the FBI and the Department of Homeland Security. It's a great group you should check out if you haven't. Spent time as an adjunct professor at a technical college. Outside of work, really, I continue to hang out in the information security community and spending time with my family, of course. But to the nuts and bolts of it, why we're here, Meltdown and Spectre, the beautiful logos that were created for these 2 vulnerabilities. And, of course, Intel's response to this, it's not that big of a deal. Everything's okay. So how do these work? Both of these work on speculative execution, and this is a great comic by XKCD. I'll give you a second to kind of read over it here, and this is basically the gist of what's going on. We use speculative branching in modern processors to kind of execute both paths of what could possibly be going on at the same time, and then discard the ones that we don't choose to use. So this is going to be more of a takeaway of what you can do currently to guard against, but we'll have a little bit of a high level, very, very high level. These are very in-depth vulnerabilities that leverage physical aspects of the hardware itself. So these are very technical things that we don't really have time to get into. So just the very high level here, how Meltdown works. It works on out of order instruction operation sets. Meaning, we like to think that processors work in a stream pipeline. You get A, B, C, D, E, F, and they execute as such. With multi-threads, multi-cores, multi-processors, a lot of times, we don't operate that way, and CPUs haven't operated that way for about a decade now. So these out-of-order operation sets let us execute multiple sets of instructions, and then, again, just discard what we're not currently using. The way that Meltdown executes and pulls information out is through a covert channel. Some of you may be familiar with covert channels and networking. It's essentially just an area of data, an area in operation where data shouldn't be, but it is. In Meltdown's case, this is the CPU cache. And what we gain from this is kernel access. So we have full read memory, full read access to all memory, which is pretty damning if you've ever done incident response or been in that area. Anytime that you can have full access to memory, you basically have full access to the system. And this is mainly affected on Intel. I have an asterisk here. AMD and ARM processors also work on out-of-order instruction operations. So I wouldn't be surprised to see down the road if this boot doesn't drop. I think both of these exploits are an octopus with lots of boots on. The other big one released here was Spectre, which leverages and utilizes branch prediction. Again, similar to the out-of-order operation set, this is more on the process level of choosing which side of those operations has been chosen and then executing upon that and discarding the rest. What that gives us for Spectre is current process memory. And that is a little different from the kernel access giving us all access to everything. The current process is only whatever that Spectre leveraged inside. It affects all hardware. All hardware works on specular branching currently. So what does that really mean? The practical breakdown here is that Meltdown has access to all memory if executed, the entirety of your system, where Spectre is only its own memory of that process. And as such, being CPU-based and hardware-based attacks, there is no real patch to these. There are patches out, and that might be a little bit of a misnomer to call it that, but you can't patch hardware. You know, it's a processor. There's no way to really patch around a physical thing. So the attack vectors, looking at the high level here of Meltdown, you know, it probably could be remotely executed. I can think of a couple scenarios, but mainly this is going to be executed on platform. An attacker gets a hold of your system and then leverages Meltdown to gain access to your memory. And what that's going to give them is privilege escalation, really. You know, you come in on a standard user account attack, you have now full access to the memory kernel, you can pull out hashes and passwords from the entirety of the system. You own the entire box at this point. Some of the other aspects that this could be really critical for is containerization escaping. And this is probably bigger in the cloud than it is in your own home systems or work systems. The cloud uses software operations to segregate sets of memory and then execute upon those. With Meltdown, if we can breach across those boundaries, we now have, you have a shared host with 3 or 4 parent companies working on it in the cloud. Well, if one of those gets popped, Meltdown gives it execution across the entire kernel. All 4 of these companies are now in danger, right? Some of the other kind of trickle downs from that, and these both have question marks, is just based on the way that they similarly work. Are there options for hypervisor escape? Are there options to get around sandboxing in your antivirus? I mean, these are all possibilities, and again, we're going to have to wait and see what comes of it. Spectre, on the other hand, is most certainly going to be used in remote attacks. A lot of what the attack vector here is going to look like is going to be leaked information, and it's probably going to be from browsers. Specifically, Java applets, Java scriptlets, just-in-time compilers like Python and Ruby, they're all going to be more vulnerable to using command injection on this and really getting people in the door. Again, with Spectre, we're looking at, you're based on that internal process, not full kernel access. So, what's the worst that could happen? Well, if they're operating in a browser, one of my biggest concerns is now they have access to the entirety of that browser memory, which, password containers, password key rings, there's a lot of interesting data that can be executed from just that single process. One of the other things that I really want to note here, very doom and gloomy, is we used ASLR, which was address space layout randomization, and DEP, data execution protections, to really help secure browsers in the browser space. Spectre kind of melts these walls down a little bit. So I think, I hate to give this as the prediction hour, but I think realistically we're going to see a little bit more of an ushering in of more browser-based attacks again. This is going to give people leverage to really get back in the door. So, I mean, what does that mean? Is that it? Game over, right? Hardware vulnerabilities, there's no real. These both work on out-of-order instruction operations, which, again, ARM and AMD both utilize. The exploits provided didn't have any practical applications yet, but there's lots of people out there with lots of time on their hands. So we may not be vulnerable now on AMD and Intel for things like Meltdown, but it's potential. And again, Spectre, you know, we have full access to an entire browser memory. So this is kind of the hyperbole that you guys have been hearing, I'm sure a lot of, because I certainly have been wading through it. And really, you know, I don't want to echo it too much, but what I'm really saying here is that the end is nigh, right? This is it. We have no security anymore. Well, not really. So to kind of dispel this a little bit, starting with Meltdown, I mean, yes, this is bad. It is bad. We're not going to sugarcoat it, but it's not that bad. Meltdown was patched back in November with a Kaiser/KPTI patch, kernel page table isolation. So this really helps to isolate and stop the leaking. But it also has a performance impact on the hardware itself. It is non-negligible. There, again, back to the hyperbole, there's been you know, some Twitter posts and some blog posts and email notifications saying things like, you know, 50 to 70% I've seen out there. More realistically, what I've seen from research is around the 3 to 17 mark, which is considerably lower, but that is still an impact. That is something that you want to be wary of. Microsoft has also patched this as well. However, the big caveat here is because of the way antivirus systems operate in the page table, Microsoft wasn't able to install the patch and turn everything on without taking a look. So what they did was if you had third-party AV installed, then they did not set the registry switch. So you may have installed the patch, but there's a fair chance that it might not actually be active. And I have some resources at the end to give you some more information on how to go about checking that. The other patches that we want to talk about, you know, the shoe kind of dropped here in early 2018. However, this was under embargo since June of last year. Intel has known about this. The big fish have known about this. The cloud providers like AWS, EC2 is all patched up. Microsoft Azure is patched. The large cloud hosting providers are already taking their security measures. With that being said, some of the smaller ones, they weren't part of the embargo. They got the information with the rest of us. And people with homebrew clouds, the medical space, banking space, a lot of the times, these people will have to be mitigating on their own. And they need to be cautious of the performance hits there. Spectre, moving on to Spectre. Spectre has some workarounds in Chrome, and we'll get to that again on the resource page. And patches are incoming. Internet Explorer and Edge have both been patched. Mozilla's got some back-end patching that they're working on that has to do with, you know, injecting some jitter. Both of these are timing-based attacks, so they're kind of trying to work their way around it here. But if we're being honest, you know, there's been a lot of talk of Intel backdoor or a design flaw in the CPUs. The CPUs are functioning as they should be and as they were designed to be. This is just a really nifty trick that somebody's leveraged. If we didn't have these out-of-order operations and these multi-threading kind of malleability, the efficacy and performance of our current processors, we'd be set back somewhere between 3 to 5 years. All right, so what can we do today? What's our real takeaway here, right? Patch all the things, but patch carefully. Again, there are non-negligible performance hits with this, and you're really going to need to make those assessments yourself. If you have a server that's running around 50-60%, you know, there's a good chance that you can take, even if it's an egregious 30% hit on performance. Not ideal, but it's going to be operational. If you have boxes that are, you know, running around 70s, 80s, that might be a little bit more of a risk. For Spectre, have your users log out. This is the biggest key, the biggest takeaway in defense that I can give you today. Log out of web applications. And that's, you know, anything that you have to log into, log out. Don't just close your browser. What happens there is you create session keys with the servers that you're communicating with. If you close your browser out, that session key stays open on the server. And there's a good chance that if your memory isn't flushing constantly, which it's not typically, not in this instance anyway, somebody with Spectre access can still get that session key and then take that and inject it themselves and pretend to be you on the server side, When you log out, that session key is destroyed on the server side. That is your biggest defense for Spectre currently. With that in mind, Chrome has some tab isolation, and what that does is that gives you the ability to launch every new tab in a new process. So you're better isolating the browser itself specifically to each tab. It's a stopgap. It's not going to be the real fix here. Chrome tab isolation, Microsoft. Be sure to go through your systems. Again, I'll have the resource up here for you. Gracie the dog, Kevin Beaumont has a great compiled list of the antivirus systems that are out there, the big players, and what their status is. He's updating it constantly. He's doing fantastic work. But I will give you that link. Check against it. Make sure that you're okay to flip that before you actually go into the registry, flip it, and break your systems. Other browsers are working on patches. Again, IE and Edge were patched with KB 4056892 and 90, I believe it was. And Firefox is working on it. They will know when they know, and you'll know when they know, really. They auto patch at this point. It's very unlikely that Microsoft is going to roll this patch out to XP or 2003. I am not an oracle. I'm not going to pretend to predict the future. I will, however, say I would be floored if they did this. So you're going to need to do the math on legacy systems. A lot of companies we see out there are holding back Server 03 because it's not fiscally possible for them. This might kind of change that calculus for you. If you have these old servers that are now vulnerable and will remain vulnerable, you need to make a good risk assessment. And that really brings it to the last point there, is make the risk assessment for you. If you've worked with any type of risk assessment company, they will tell you that risk is a living, breathing, evolving machine. It shouldn't take a vulnerability like this to get you to be thinking about risk. That's neither here nor there. But, make the assessment based on what your needs are and what you're willing to tolerate. Okay, there we go. So at the end of the day, it is terrible, but it's not so terrible, right? The amount of hyperbole on this was insane. Everywhere I turned, there were new allegations and new claims of higher performance hits. Meltdown could walk into the corner store and steal TVs. It was insanity. Clickbaity headlines aren't going to go away. This is our current cycle. This is how it lives. So focus on data-driven facts and find sources that you can really trust. Here's a quick final walkout for you, just a takeaway. Meltdown versus Spectre. Meltdown allows kernel access memory reads. Yes, all physical access. Spectre does not, of course. Was it patched with Kaiser KPTI? Meltdown, yes, it was. Spectre, no patches currently. Leaks arbitrary memory user memory. They both do. You have full kernel access with Meltdown. It goes both ways. Most likely, or remote execution. Again, with Meltdown, I see some scenarios. This is mainly going to be an onboard exploit. Whereas Spectre, most certainly, I would be surprised to see it locally versus remote. Most likely to impact, again, kernel integrity with Meltdown. You have access to everything. Spectre, browser memory. Practical attacks against Meltdown, Intel. TSX is what really leverages that. And Spectre, Intel, ARM, AMD, all the things, all the processors. All right, well, that's it. Thanks for letting us earn your trust. And I have references up here. There we go. For a takeaway, screenshot that, whatever you got to do. We'll get it out to you as well. All of these are great reading on this, and specifically the Gracie the dog, Kevin Beaumont AV status is a huge resource that's out there right now. With that, we'll take any questions if we have time.
Yeah, this is Aaron. Thanks, Zach. If any of you have questions, could you please either raise your hand in the GoToMeeting or send a chat question over the client. I do have one right here. Somebody was asking if you could go over the industries most susceptible and then maybe give a layman's example of what could happen to them. So sort of by industry, let's take healthcare, for example.
Yeah, so healthcare, and again, healthcare is one of those ones where a lot of the times you see a homegrown cloud or a hybrid cloud system in-house. So what you're going to see there is you have multiple departments, multiple areas running all of their servers on one, or pulling data from one main cloud, quote unquote, source. Meltdown specifically would be the use in this case. And what it would be is that, somebody got, say, an email, that attacker got access to that person's user account. They now have access on a user-based level to that cloud system. However, leveraging Meltdown, they're going to be able to walk through the memory, pull down the entirety of the memory of that cloud system, and then forage through there to find specifically, if it were me, I'd be looking for credentials to privilege escalate. So is there an admin account that's on there? If so, is it a domain admin or is it a local cloud admin? If it's domain admin, now I have access to the entirety of the hospital typically. Again, that might be a little bit of a quick jump scenario. There's usually a little bit more work to it than that. But those are the kinds of things that you're really going to see with Meltdown specifically.
Here's a question. What is the timing on either of these two? So is this something that people need to worry about happening next week, or is this something that we're going to see sort of a slow trickle over the next 6 months?
Yes, and that's yes to both. So I don't necessarily expect to see a lot of leverage of Meltdown as such. But I know I was at a client site this morning doing some penetration testing, and one of our scanning systems, Nessus, had alerted us to Spectre vulnerability on one of their cloud systems, or one of their web systems rather. So, if the big guys are already telling us that these vulnerabilities are available, there's a good chance that they are. With that being said, again, the embargo happened June of last year. Kaiser KPTI patch happened in November. There was a large subset of the hacker community that looked at the KPTI being kernel page table isolation and wondered, why are they making this giant change to memory and the way memory is handled? And a lot of people started doing investigations and found pretty similar attacks to Spectre. Now that both of these are public, we're going to see a lot more trickle out from this. And again, specifically on the Spectre side, I expect this to usher in a new era of browser-based vulnerability and attacks.
Okay. I think we've got, being respectful of everyone's time, I think we've got time for one more question here. Here's one. What should we be asking IT or technical partnerships to do to ensure that we're not susceptible? So a business, let's say that you've got a CEO or somebody who runs a business on the phone who isn't technical. What do they need to tell their IT folks that they should do, or their IT service provider to do in order to protect them?
Specifically for Microsoft folk, be vigilant and be on top of, maybe not on top of, but open that communication line with your IT department to really check your patching procedure. I know personally a lot of people that would have just applied this patch, let the system reboot, and that was it, without knowing that the third-party AV flag, if it's installed, which, we deities hope that you are using antivirus, Microsoft looks at this and doesn't set the flag. So the patch is installed, however, the patch isn't doing anything. Specifically, be sure that you guys are utilizing a good patch cycle, and that's just, IT best practice. But specifically check with this patch to make sure that your AV is on the list for going ahead and applying the patch correctly. What was the other part of the question?
And I think you answered it.
Okay.
What would be the thing that you'd ask IT?
Yeah, specifically, did you get the Microsoft patch, which was a couple slides back here, KB 4056892. little long-winded. We can get this out with the follow-up email as well. And did you check against a repository to see that your antivirus was acceptable to be used with this patch? If it's not, again, get on your vendors. Make sure that your vendors have a plan for it. And that's really the key.
Okay, well, thanks a lot, Zach. Thanks, everybody, for attending ProCircular's flash briefing. We'll do these from time to time when new information comes out. As Zach mentioned, we'll make the video available, and we'll get you copies of the PowerPoint presentation. If you have any suggestions for future flash briefings, or if there's information that you'd like from us, please don't hesitate to email either of us. Or just go to our website at ProCircular.com and look for help. So thanks for your time, and have a great day.
Thanks, everyone.